Welcome back to the Football Insomniac podcast. My name is Colin Watt and I'm your host, and I'm absolutely delighted today to bring you a very special guest. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Bohemians Football Club in Ireland, Daniel Lambert. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Cheers, Colin. Good, yeah, it's as good as can be. We're in lockdown here in Dublin, so working from home.
And talk me through the shirt. This is a Bohemian shirt, yeah? Yeah.
This is our away shirt from 2020. So we worked with Amnesty International. We put the refugees welcome and love football, hate racism on the back.
So, fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a staple of Bohemians Football Club themselves. It's something that you're very proud of, isn't it?
Yeah, we do a lot. We do a lot of work with people from non-Irish backgrounds. We do a lot of work with people from people who are at risk of loneliness, older people, with homeless people, people in prison. And we try to do a lot of work in the local area here in Dublin. And we've become really heavily involved with a group called Massey, who they represent asylum seekers. And there'll be a lot of people from non-Irish backgrounds, in Dublin and in the part of the city we're in. So we try and make it a welcoming place for them and encourage them to get involved in the club.
It's a fantastic initiative and something that we will cover later on when we discuss in more detail about Bohemians. If you are joining us today, we are live on YouTube, on Twitter and on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, give us a like, leave a comment. If you've got any questions for Daniel, leave them in the comment section and we'll bring it up later on in the show. But we take a look at Frank Lampard, and that was 12 months in charge of Derby County. Takes them up to the playoffs, very close to getting promotion into the Premiership, and then the job at Chelsea comes along. Now, he was almost had his hands tied behind his back at first with the transfer embargo, but since then he's spent over £200 million this summer. Chelsea are sitting towards mid-table in the Premiership, and you can see that there was no sense of sentimentality there, and they just they decided to cut cords. Now, obviously, it's a difficult decision to make, especially for someone that was a club legend. But I'm just going to bring up this comment here from Gordon Coney. He says, Lampard would be a profile appointment, and that's not what we need. So I think he's talking about Celtic here. We need a coach that can develop young players and rejuvenate the more experienced players. Now, speaking about that with Frank Lampard as well, he did seem to bring on the development of a couple of young players, more specifically Mason Mount and Billy Gilmore. Two young talents who really... Mason Mount was given his opportunity at Derby County. Billy Gilmore made the move from Rangers to Chelsea and now seems to be one of the hot talents down there. But just before we were speaking about that, Daniel, we were saying about the sense of sentimentality about letting Frank leave the club. Would that be a difficult decision for yourself if there was a Bohemians legend that was in charge and things just weren't going to plan?
Yeah, no, I think it would be a difficult decision for anybody. I think a lot of it is around how you position and how, as a club, like what, results are one part that's really important, obviously, to a club, but just building this culture and a system where everybody feels like they're buying into something, that it's not just ultimately about the results on the pitch. There's a combination of things happening, whether that's growth in terms of youth players, like you mentioned, growth as a club, the atmosphere and the ethos that somebody's creating. And I think that you get a sense of that. And with a manager, when you're involved, at a club, aside from just being a fan, you get a sense of all of these things may be happening, and that things are, once they're on the right trajectory, things are moving forward as a whole. So I think you're kind of looking at all those things and balancing them up. But I do think, like I said, I don't think people are given enough time at all. And it seems to just be an easy option for owners and the hierarchy at a club to say, right, let's switch the manager, rather than look at maybe the conditions that the manager operates in and making sure that he has all the support that he needs.
And when you take a look at it, he's now been replaced by Thomas Tuchel, who is the former Borussia Dortmund and PSG manager. He's actually got 13 years managerial experience. Is that the thing that clubs are now looking for? Is the risk on going for a high-profile name now being sort of pushed to the side and they're looking for experience. We see guys like Sam Allardyce coming back into the game at West Brom, and there's been a lot of calls down south for young managers to be given a chance. But when it comes to it, is it the experience or is it the big name profile that a team would be looking for when they're making their next appointment?
I think, look, in the UK, it may be different for us. And in Ireland, I think what you're trying to find, ultimately, those two things come into play, but it's a fit. Does this person fit what you're trying to do as a club? And, for us, and I think, as a club, when we were looking at managers in the past, it wasn't necessarily about, and we were coming from a place from, like, our current manager is with us quite a long time now. He's just signed a 4-year deal with us, which is fantastic. And he came in as a relatively unknown manager, and we weren't in a great place financially. So look, if you've got the finances to bring in somebody with a proven track record, fantastic. If you don't, you got to sometimes go for somebody a little bit younger. But ultimately, I think it's the fit. It's if they fit the ethos and the values, and they fit what you're about as a club. Aside from saying they can win games, because every manager is going to want to win games, but do they get what the club is about, and are they willing to buy into that and embody that and drive that forward? I think that's what's important. To me, that's what should be most important.
Yeah, and we've definitely got some Bohemians fans in at the minute. We've got Cormac Ryan here saying, hopefully Keith Long goes nowhere soon. And I think he just confirmed that. He's got a 4-year deal, so he's be going nowhere. And also he comes in to say, Bohemians, a club with a proper youth development policy. Big questions raised about Celtic's youth setup. So speak a bit more about the youth development. Is that a big part of the ethos there? Is that something that when you're looking to bring in a manager, you're hoping that he's the person that can develop the players and ultimately sell them on? I mean, there was some big moves from Bohemians there in the last few months. Andre Wright moving to Ayr United, Daniel Grant off to Huddersfield. So is that certainly part of something that you're looking at when you're looking at the candidates?
Yeah, totally. For us, like, I suppose we're in a situation in Ireland where a lot of the clubs around us in the league table would have private investment. We're a fully members-owned club, so when you've got private investment and you've got that ability to basically turn a tap on and off in terms of finances, you can bring in players, you can take players from other clubs, you can pay top salaries, and it's not something that we can compete on toe to toe. So we got to look to bring young players through, develop them, and if those players want to progress to the UK and there's a transfer fee, that's part of the model as well. So it's something that we focus on. I think last year we had the 15th youngest squad in the whole of Europe. We were in the Europa League, but we did an exceptionally young team. I think the average age was about 22. So it's definitely a priority for us. But like all young players or young people in any industry, they make mistakes, and that's to be expected. But you get maximum effort, maximum commitment, and they really play for the shirt. And more and more are coming through our own youth setup at the club, and it's something that it has to be a priority for us, as I said, because we haven't been in a position over the last number of years to bring in, to match maybe what other people could pay in terms of salaries, or to just use finances as the main tool for recruitment. It's got to be development.
Yeah, and you take a look at someone who is a kind of big name ex-player that has went down that route. We take a look at someone like Pep Guardiola, someone that came through the Barca Academy, La Masia, or La Masia, for my Spanish isn't great, but takes the Barca B team into the Barcelona team, and you look at some of the players that were brought through there, and that's still part of the sort of ethos around Barcelona, is bringing through young talent. You see it even now with guys like Pudge coming through, who is making a big name for himself in the first team, moves on to Bayern Munich, develops young players. He brings players over from teams like Arsenal. You look at someone like Serge Gnabry and how he developed, the same with Kingsley Coman. And then at Manchester City, he's doing the same with guys like Phil Foden. So there is ex-players out there that do have the calibre that can go on to do it. But for me, I think they're few and far between. And I just think it's a risk that a lot of teams are taking now to sort of bring in a high-profile ex-player over someone who can help them out long-term. We take a look at Wayne Rooney at Derby. Now, Wayne Rooney coming in to replace Philip Cocu. Derby are sitting towards the bottom of that league. If they go down this season, they're probably be in serious trouble. But then it comes out this week that Wayne Rooney has been paid £90,000 a week as a salary. Now, surely the idea being that if you bring in a player that's looking to make their name in the game, you wouldn't have to pay them as much as what you would for an experienced manager. But with this situation with Derby County, it just seems extraordinary.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think like it's funny with someone like Wayne Rooney and where he would have played and the level he's at. And to then, you'd wonder, is that a gap if you're playing at that level and then even to win to Derby, which would be, a drop from the level that Wayne Rooney played at? Is there a mismatch? I suppose it's an easy one. It's easy in terms of bringing in a high profile name. You get the instant reaction and you get the positive media coverage. But I think the points you've raised there are very valid. Is it just a short term kind of solution that ultimately you're not looking at bringing in somebody who perhaps might get, if fans are saying, who's that type comment, you got to be able to stand over who the person is in the background and respect what they've done, respect what their plans are, respect their ethos, and feel that they're a fit. So maybe it's a case that, these appointments are made with kind of a bit of a comfort blanket wrapped in them. You get the instant recognizability in somebody who's everyone knows who they are, but ultimately they don't have the skill set or they haven't developed as a manager. And maybe there's a temptation with these bigger players as well that they don't want to start out down in the conference or start down 5 or 6 divisions. They feel because of their profile in the game as a player that, maybe they should go in at a certain level, and maybe that's not justified.
Yeah, I think that's always been the case for, I'd say, about 90% of managers. For a lot of ones that go in at a high level, you then see them leaving that club and going down to a sort of lower division. I'm thinking of probably Roy Keane here, coming in as Sunderland manager when they were in the Premiership, having to make that step down to Ipswich Town, and then he's been out of the game now for so long. It seems as though clubs are not willing to take the risk on him now because of his performances. Chris Sutton, big name across English football and Scottish football, comes in at Lincoln City, doesn't do well, never gets another manager's job. Gary Neville as well, away over to Valencia. Now, you'll never see Gary Neville's name linked with a high-profile job. I think as much as it is the temptations there for teams to go and appoint the big name, hoping to get sponsorship off the back of it, the way Derby County have, I think at the end of the day, they still need that experience in there. And if you take a look at Rangers this season, or even the last couple of seasons, bringing in a big name like Steven Gerrard, they still do have guys in the background there that have the coaching experience that back up the appointment. So it's got to be a very selective process you go through to do something like that. Would you be tempted if someone like Wayne Rooney or David Beckham or Gary Neville says that they put the application in for the Bohemians job? Is that something you would consider?
It wouldn't be just to me, it'd be to our board. Honestly, the way I'd see it would be, no, that wouldn't be the style that we'd go for. I think, like we've said a few times now, we're about the values and the ethos and a fit. And I think that, quick fixes on big names, I don't think, it's not something that to me personally would kind of, get me excited. I think that like you said there, very often you get the big reaction and the big bit of coverage and then it crashes. I think I'd rather go for a safe pair of hands, somebody who buys into something long term. I do think a lot of these appointments too from players, like when you read about, and it's obvious, but I've read quite a bit on what happens to players at the end of their career, especially the higher profile players where you have this adulation and fame and fortune all coming in just in an intense period of your life, from your kind of late teens to your early 30s. And that ends. And I think a lot of these appointments are where they tend to go, or whether it was Keane or Rooney, that there's just this big gap that's probably difficult to understand unless you've been there, and you don't feel you'll fulfill that at a lower club, which may be the better option, a lower league club in terms of developing this part of your career. But the temptation is to try and go in big, keep some of that kind of excitement and that kind of, high profile, high octane kind of existence. But ultimately that doesn't tie over between the player and to the manager. So I think that the temptation is probably as much on the player side to do that and keep those things as anywhere else. So it's an interesting topic. But for us now, I tend to look at what somebody was about and what they're them as a person kind of in a room chatting through their plans rather than what they've done publicly.
So what we can say here is we've written off Frank and his Uncle Harry appearing in Dublin anytime soon. But it will be interesting to see where the next step in his career is. I have a feeling he'd probably have to drop down, probably either to the Championship or maybe top end of League One, rebuild his reputation and come back from that. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that is a good football grounding in management. Some players have to go through it when they're coming through. A lot of players go out on loan to lower league clubs and then make their breakthrough. I think that's going to be the case in management as well. And I think certainly there's a chance that he could go on to be a fantastic coach, but he'll have to learn from his mistakes at Chelsea and rebuild again.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that totally. And look, it should make the person, as you said, sometimes you drop from where you were, and it can add to, you see, like loads of players have done this, and it can make them hungrier. They can learn from it. They can just build mental resilience. And I think that, these are all things that managers need to have in spades.
Yeah, Definitely. So, an interesting topic this week in terms of management. Obviously, Chelsea taking the non-sentimentality approach. Other teams across the UK sticking with their managers maybe through a sense of sentimentality. Leave your comments and let me know if that's what you believe as well. Delighted today to be joined by Bohemians Chief Operating Officer Daniel Lambert. We are live on YouTube, Facebook and Periscope. If you're a Bohemians fan, drop us a question and we'll ask Daniel ahead of the new season. A lot coming up, but we are going on to our next topic, which is something that I ask anybody I get on as a guest, Daniel, and this always brings up some interesting talking points. It is the dream football dinner party. Now, football dinner party is probably quite a high-end term. What would you call a gathering over in Dublin? What's that called? In Scotland, it's called an empty. What is it called in Dublin?
I would just say a few pints, really, even if it was dinner. That'll always be there'd probably be more alcohol than food, but
So the idea of this, and for anyone that's watching for the first time, basically the idea is Daniel is going to have 4 people from the world of football, dead or alive, because for 24 hours only we've managed to bring them back to life. It was a fantastic feat of achievement, but just like Cinderella, when the clock strikes 12, that's it, it's done. And they're coming over to your house, Daniel. First of all, what would be on the table? What would you cook for them, or is it just strictly pints?
I don't know. We'd have to have something. But I'd probably make. I've gotten into the last 4 or 5 months. I've gotten big into during lockdown cooking tagines, which sounds very, very. I got a cheap tagine pot, and I started trying to make them. And so it's got lamb and potatoes and apricots and stuff, and you keep it in the oven for a couple of hours. So some tagine with some bread, and you can just dip into that in the middle of the table.
I wonder if this will then line up with the guest that you're about to announce that's coming to the Lambert household. So who is arriving first? Who's coming here to try the tagine? Who's turning up with a bottle of wine? Who is guest number 1?
Guest number 1 would probably have more than a bottle of wine with him. Robin Friday, for me, I just would have loved to meet him. You know, I think his life story, and it's tragic and fascinating, and just everything. The amount of stories from that man's life, and his goal to game ratio for Reading, but on and off the pitch, it's mad. It's like I'm sure you've come across him or you've read about him, but it's stunning. So I think for loads of reasons, I just would have loved to meet him. I'd say it would be as dangerous as it would be entertaining. Anything could happen. And
one of our regular contributors here on A State of Mind, Kevin Graham, is a massive Robin Friday fan. In fact, he is the only other person that I've had on so far that has had Robin Friday at his dinner party. So if Kevin's commenting, I'm just waiting on it popping up. There's maybe a slight delay there, but it's going to pop up shortly, and he's going to go on about a story about Robin Friday. But no, the guy, as you say, on the pitch, off the pitch, just a complete showman, and the stories that you would hear would be fantastic. So as you say, he's turning up with maybe just a wee bit more than a bottle of wine, but he's the first one through the door. Who would be joining him at the table? Sorry.
The second one, and there's just a local reason for it. It'd be Liam Whelan. He died of the Munich air disaster, but Liam grew up and lived about 5 minutes from where I'm sitting now. He grew up around the corner, and there's a bridge just beside my house here named after him. And he would have grew up like the floodlights for our stadium literally are above his house. And he died at 22, but he died so young. It's hard to know. But when you read about what he'd done, he was probably going to be one of the best Irish players of all time. He would have had a phenomenal career. And just as a local person, his grave and his house and his family, his brother only died last year. He used to come to the Bohemians games. He used to talk to his brother in the stadium, and there's not a lot, just because of the time when it was, and interviews. There's not a lot of interviews with him, not a lot of coverage, and just as he probably would have been one of the greatest footballers, and is one of the greatest footballers to ever come from Dublin, but just had such a short career. I think it'd be great to meet him, even just for one night.
Now, as you say, it's like players like that, and especially that disaster, taken from us far too soon. And I guess having someone like that at the table, you are looking for a bit of the history from back then as well. Obviously, football's changed so much since then, and I think it would be interesting if they could come back and see the impact that they've had on football since that disaster. So, Yeah, a really interesting one is your second at the table. Who's third through the Lambert household?
Third, I'm sure. Look, you must have had this guy a lot of times, and it's sort of like one of the obvious ones you'd go for. But just for a lot of like in football, yeah, and for so much that he did outside of football and things that he stood for, be Maradona. And like two of my favorite football related, and they're only very very loosely football related photographs, is him with the Stop Bush T-shirt on, with the protesting the Iraq War. But probably one of my favorite photographs ever is when he's sitting with Fidel Castro. And he's showing Castro his tattoo of Castro in Cuba. just for that, as something that happened is it's totally mad. And I'd say again, Maradona might depending on what stage of life, he might have brought more than wine with him as well. But for every reason, his whole life, like Robin Friday, but less tragic. What a person!
As you say, Diego Maradona is someone that is probably picked quite often on here. And obviously we had the very tragic news that he passed away last year. But I mean, the stories that Diego leaves behind, I mean, it's not just the brilliance on the park, it's off the park as well. And he is a massive loss to football. And you said that it depends on what stage in his career that you get him. You can pick that. So you can pick which Diego Maradona turns up to your house. You pick his age, just whenever he wants to turn up. But I'm sure we would all ask him the question about the hand of God, and we would sit there and have him tell it 100 times over, unless you're English. If you're English and you're watching, I'm sorry. But finally, who completes the sorry?
Yeah, for me, the last one, it's probably a classic Irish answer, but Jack Charlton. And Jack Charlton, like as a kid growing up here, like I suppose, like when you look at Ireland, we haven't qualified for many tournaments, and like Jack got to Euro 88. He got to Italia 90 and he got to, 94. He qualified for 3 major tournaments. We'd never been to a major tournament ever. And Ireland, like when I, early 90s, I was a kid, and like I remember so much about that, even though I was so young. All the footpaths were painted green, white and orange. Jack became this absolute national hero. Everyone got off school. It was just, and we were kind of coming out of what Ireland was a poor country for a long time in the 70s, 80s, mass emigration. And it was just this sense of just pride in Ireland, and Jack brought that. And I remember like photographs from his first game, I think it was in 86, and his first game in Lansdowne Road was a banner hung out and it said "Go home, Union Jack," because of the appointment to somebody that was English, and the way he turned that around and went from somebody who I suppose would have been seen as somewhat of an outsider to absolutely just an Irish man, and he just brought what he brought to the country is amazing. I don't think another person in sport will ever bring that sense of just change and optimism and obviously things with the North at the time as well. There was a lot going on in Ireland, and he managed to just bring people together. And he just a gentleman. Like, just I think what he did, like as a player, he obviously didn't reach the heights of his brother, and I don't think he played for England until he was 30. But just reading about his life and going down to the mines at a young age and then becoming a footballer but what he did with Ireland for me, and just the way he came across, he held himself with such grace, and right until the end of his management career when he was failing to qualify, I think for the Euros in '96. But what a guy!
I mean, the stories that you hear about Jack and his time in charge of Ireland are incredible, and the amount of players that became Irish under Jack Charlton's reign as well. A lot of Ireland's kind of biggest stars became Irish overnight as soon as they tasted the pint of Guinness. But when you look back on it, if you look at Jack's time in charge of Ireland, what would be the key moment? What's the minute that you kind of look back to and say that defines Jack's time in charge of Ireland?
There's two for me to be drawn 1-1 with England, and just again, like you have to bring in sort of the political context at the time, and that game, like in Euro 88, my dad was at it. And to go up against England when no one gave us hope at all, and to get a 1-1 draw. But I think what overshadows that later, that kind of, that's the big marker. He's only there 2 years. He's qualified. He goes and does that. But Ray Houghton in the Giant Stadium, 94 against Italy. What a goal. And to be on to get to a World Cup for the second time in a row with a country who's never been there, and to go up against Italy. And that result and Ray Houghton's goal, that to me, will it ever be better as an Irish fan than right then? Probably not.
And it's something as a Scotsman I'm actually very jealous of, because for my whole life, I've only really remembered one game where Scotland's been at a major tournament, and that's France '98. And at that, I was in primary school back then. I was 4 years old when that happened. So my memories of that tournament aren't the best. And hopefully next summer or this summer coming up, we'll see Scotland at a major tournament for the first time in 23 years, which will be incredible. And if there's a Jack Charlton moment in there under Steve Clarke, that would be incredible. But to have that experience as an Irishman, that must be incredible. And it's something that will get talked about for years and years and years to come. I mean, since then, Ireland have qualified for major tournaments. You've seen it in 2002 with Robbie Keane. But nothing will top that period under Jack, will it?
No, absolutely not. And it's funny because I think there's some people, and this is what pundits do and what football fans do, but you look at the squad we had back then, like it almost everyone's playing at a top club. And you look at it on paper, and a lot of people say, should he have played a different style of football? Could we have went further? And all those points are valid and are worth chatting about. But I think from Jack's point of view, you just look at where Ireland had been. We'd never qualified for a tournament, and what he managed to do. And I think that when you compare those two things, where we were coming from and where he got us to, his record is amazing. It really is. And I think lots of the elements I mentioned outside of football, I just think as a country, it sticks with everybody. It was like this turning point in where Ireland had come from, where most people leaving the country, the people beginning to stay, and the country becoming, just a bit of a different Ireland. And when you think back, those Charlton kind of 1990 and 94 World Cups kind of marked that as the transition. And I don't think. Look, I hope you get that result and you get into that tournament. And because now they live forever, and even the music around it. Like I remember, like I have a record sitting over there. There was all these songs released. Your tournament songs. But we had 20 songs for each tournament, and to be played on the radio all day, every day. One comes on today, and you remember all the words. I was 8 years old, and I remember every word of it. So it just became. It just took over. It was like real life disappeared, and football ran the country during those times.
I think the one that I could probably remember most was the version of "You'll Never Beat the Irish" that was released by the Wolftones, and translating that into the players that were playing back then, and it just shows you the kind of the calibre of players that were playing for Ireland back in that day. So we take a look at it. So we've got Jack Charlton, Robin Friday, Liam Whelan, and Diego Maradona. I think that will be a party that lasts all night. They'll be probably having to throw a couple of people out come the early morning. And if you are watching, leave us who you would have at your football dinner party. Joe Porter's just done that, saying that Maradona was one of those rare people that transcends his gender. He's an icon out with football as well as on the football, a rare breed. And I think you have a couple of them with Robin Friday, with Diego Maradona, and even I think with Jack Charlton as well, because when he was the manager of Ireland, he was more than just the football manager. He was a sort of icon of the Irish spirit, wasn't he? Totally.
And the way he did it, and I just think that like I said earlier, the grace and just the presence about him. He had this kind of class about him. He never descended into pettiness. He had this he had this sense of just respect and integrity, and he never lost that. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone in Ireland who doesn't ultimately totally respect Jack. And they mightn't have agreed that, as I said, there was this kind of hoofball that was levelled against him, and the kind of the long ball game, which he definitely played. And people might disagree with that, but there'd be nobody who didn't have respect for him. And he kept that through his whole, through the whole time he was manager and after that. And I think that's rare, and it's something that's just a really nice thing.
And staying on the Irish theme, we are going to discuss more about your role at Bohemians. Also discuss your management of the upcoming band Kneecap. I have actually checked out some of their stuff a long time ago, and it's certainly for some people. It might not be for others that's watching, but I think it's fantastic, and they are doing incredible things, selling out arenas all over Ireland, and I think the plan is for them to tour the UK shortly as well, or once this is all over.
Yeah, there was a tour booked for February because we did a UK tour last February, sold out G2 in Glasgow. Glasgow crowd was mental. That was, and then we went down Liverpool, Birmingham, London. So that's moved to September. So we'll be doing the G2 big room in Glasgow in September. And I think the tickets were the room sold out instantly in Glasgow, and we we up the size of the room. So anyone can get to that. It was pretty mad the last time.
So we'll start discussing about that. But let's start with Bohemians now. You're the chief operating officer, and if we take a look back at Bohemians last season, finished second in the League of Ireland, a sort of condensed League of Ireland due to what's going on at the minute. But you have qualified for the Conference League. You're one of the first teams to have qualified for that because of the way the Irish season runs. The season's not meant to start again till March 19th. It's a kind of awkward position you find yourselves in just because of the way that the Irish season's set out. But the questions first came in here from Damien Gallagher, who asks, do you find it difficult competing with the GAA in terms of getting talent, crowd support, and if so, how do you combat that? Now, for anyone that's maybe not so clued up on GAA, and you're asking, is it difficult to get talent between GAA and with what the Irish call association football? You find that a lot of players actually, right up until the age of 17, 18, play both.
Yeah, no, totally. And there's a lot of research on this to say that multi-sport approach at a young age is a better approach. You develop different skill sets, and it's something that there's always debate on. But the GAA, like I grew up playing GAA. I played for the local club here, and I was a member there, and I played football as well. So I think historically there was this kind of the GAA. If you go back and you speak to older people in their 50s and 60s, it was kind of against the policy to play both. And at school you might have been told you can't play football, you got to play GAA. But the stadium directly behind me here, about a mile back, very close to our football stadium, is Crow Park, which would be the headquarters of the GAA, and that stadium holds 90,000 people. And COVID aside, they'll fill that stadium for what is an amateur game. So there's no denying that the GAA gets bigger attendances than football in Ireland, and quite significantly, it's like 90,000. You'll never get that at a football game in Ireland. So I think you got to be aware the GAA are there. I don't see us needing to be in direct competition with them. I think we can both, occupy a good place. But they are a major sport. There's something that obviously it's only played in Ireland, really. So it's not something you face other countries face, and rugby has become bigger. So it's just about, I suppose, as football clubs being aware that the other sports are there, encouraging kids to play other sports and then to specialise. And like we've just signed a guy there, Feely's just joined us, and his brother played GAA as well. And like our goalkeeper James Talbot, who's been called up to the international team, James played GAA growing up. Shane Supple, who was our academy goalkeeping coach, he was goalkeeper at Ipswich under Roy Keane. Shane played GAA, so there's a lot of players will play both. So I don't think they need to directly compete, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge in terms of media space. Like you pick up get into the summertime or into kind of early autumn when the GAA season's at its height and League of Ireland's at its height, and the GAA gets a lot of media coverage. So you're competing in that sense. But I think that's just the reality of being in Ireland, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from the GAA and that they can learn from us in terms of how they run the organisation and how we do things as clubs. So it's just something that's different, I suppose, to the country. But the GAA will always be a big presence in Ireland, and it's up to us to compete with them. But again, I think it can be done collaboratively. I don't see us needing to try and take players from each other.
Mm-hmm. Just on the other point then, so about crowd support. So if there's a GAA game and Bohemians are playing at home at the same time, does that directly impact the crowds that you would get at the ground?
It doesn't for us, thankfully. Our stadium at the moment, we're going to have a full redevelopment of our stadium. So our ground at the moment holds 3,500, and thankfully for the last 2 seasons before COVID, we were selling out every game more or less. There wouldn't really be any tickets for our games. So just our membership and our season tickets had grown a lot, and we get quite a lot of tourists actually as well. People coming from Germany in particular. So tickets weren't really available for ours. So there wasn't that kind of balance. And in GAA, funnily, the Dublin team, it's done on a county basis, has been exceptionally successful. They've won 6 All-Irelands in a row. And that started to hit the GAA crowds because there's this sense of, it's become a bit boring, really. The Dublin team just absolutely win every game. And that's begun to detract from their crowds, which has actually probably been a help for us and other clubs in Dublin.
So, I mean, the success of Dublin over the last few years is something I've managed to keep track of. It always seems when you get to the All-Ireland, Dublin make an appearance there. And the city of Dublin as well, as you say, it attracts a lot of tourists. But you mentioned the German tourist. Is there a connection with any of the specific German clubs, or is it just German football in general that comes over?
We have Union Berlin, I chat to a guy at Union Berlin, Ross over there. He's a guy, an English guy he does some of their marketing. So I chat to him. There's no direct link. We're hoping to have a friendly, hopefully, with Union Berlin. I've been chatting to him in the background, and that might be something we try to set up. And we did look as a club, and we do look a bit towards St. Pauli for some of I like some of what they do off the pitch, some of their ideas, just how they, some of the values that they'd have as a club. But no, we've just found Copa did a big piece on us in 2015, I think. And it was on the Bows Rovers derby, the big Dublin derby, and they did a great piece, and it got a lot of views on Copa, and they've included it in one of their world's best derbies. And it was really after that we started to find that we were starting to get a lot of Germans coming to games, and they all seemed to love it, and then they seemed to be telling their friends back home, and it's been more and more Germans each year. You notice them in the ground. There's always a group of Germans there, and they drink lots of beer and they buy jerseys, and they're a bit of fun. Germans, big group of Germans, so it's just sort of happened naturally.
And Cormac Ryan comes in here. It's often said that politics has no place in sport, but Bohemians have turned that on its head with the gay Bohemians, the refugees welcome, the climate justice. And it is something that you just referenced there. It has a bit of a connection with the values of St. Pauli Football Club as well. And a lot of people would say that Bohemians are almost like a St. Pauli of Ireland. Is that something you would agree with?
I don't think it's not that we've tried to. I can see where people would get that from, for sure. There is things that you can point towards that are similar, but what the points that guy Cormac has made there, we'd see all of those as being football clubs. Ultimately, when you think of what people would have got involved in, say people would have historically in Ireland gone to church. Nobody goes to everybody will still say they're Catholic on a form, but nobody goes to church. It just doesn't happen. And you look at people saying unions. Everyone used to be in a union, and less and less people are in unions. And I think there's this thing where those things in life that you maybe spent a lot of time in, you could have went to church for your whole life or been in your union for your whole life. Those things are disappearing. People work for a company for a couple of years, they move house, they can't afford a house in Dublin, and you rent a lot. So you're kind of transient. A lot of what you're doing you don't have a sense of place. But the football club still remains, and people can, I was brought to Bows as a baby by my dad, and I'll go there until I die, and so will most other fans of the club. And I think that when you take that this is something you'll do for your whole life, that the club has an ability, and all clubs do, to stand for things that we wouldn't see those things as political. They just be social things that are important for me, just from a basic, just being a good person point of view. So to have an LGBT supporters group, which we do, and welcome them, to say to people, more Irish people left this country per capita than any other country in the world. We are the immigrants of the world. That's what we were for hundreds of years. So who's to say that we shouldn't invite somebody who's come here? And something like climate, again, is climate political, or is it just kind of something that we all have to kind of begin to bear, take on board? So they're all things that, we get involved in. We do lots of other things I mentioned at the start, with people in prison, people who are homeless, people who have physical disabilities. And I just think that clubs can do all of those things, and they don't detract from the football side. Like Keith Long as manager of their first team, these things, while he might agree with them and he might think they're important, they're not going to impact upon him trying to qualify for Europe, trying to win the league, trying to win a cup. But as a club, they help us as a club connect to more people and to do things that we think are important in Dublin and a bit further out. So I think they're things that every club should be doing, really.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with any of that. You try and make football a sport for everyone, and I think that's certainly something that you can see from the Bows sort of ethos and the values of the club. Question coming in here from Joe Porter, and it's probably a bit of a cheeky one. Does Conor Mcgregor get involved in Irish football in any way?
No. The answer to that is a firm no. No, I'm not an MMA fan, but I think just from looking from the outside in, McGregor has gone from an unknown to the biggest name in Irish sport to somebody that maybe I don't think he holds much weight with sports fans. Again, a lot of controversy around him, and so I to me, it's been. I'm not an MMA fan. I've never watched one, but just from the outside in, he doesn't get involved in football, and it seems to be his career is, it seems to have risen rapidly and fallen as fast.
It was just interesting there. Cormac Ryan, his logo was Up the Dubs, which is the Dublin GAA team, and we've got K McSweet 44 coming in saying Dublin winning 6 in a row is bad for the GAA. So, which side of the fence do you stand on there?
I think anyone winning too much gets bad for the game. To be honest, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of the beauty of sport is this idea that the underdog can win, or you get this what will happen, who will win. And we've had League of Ireland, I think, has had more winners over the course of the league's history over the 100 years than I think any other league in Europe. Now, that's a good and bad thing. There's a lot of clubs have come and gone from bankruptcy, basically. I think any club, when they begin to dominate, it does detract from the game a bit. It's good for the supporters of that club, but for everyone else, it can get a bit.
We've got Cormac Ryan coming back in saying behave, so I will behave, and I'll get back to discussing Bohemians this season. So obviously this season isn't meant to start until the 19th of March. That's been put back since January. Do you still think it will go ahead then? When's the plans to start pre-season?
We're back since Monday, so okay, 2 days ago, and I think it will. I think it's been hard for clubs because last year, obviously, every club had sold their season tickets, had their sponsors on board. We all set out in February not knowing what was around the corner. And when it hit, it was hard. But, things like the season ticket sales and your sponsors and things were already in. It's harder for a lot of clubs this year because they're going into a season where they probably won't have fans. A lot of people's sponsors, like, say, pubs, restaurants, they're all closed. So it's trickier. So there's going to have to be support from the Irish government, which I think there will be. And I'd be confident on the March 19th. But I think this season for clubs is going to be a lot harder than last year. Thankfully, we've had a lot of new members, and I think hopefully all the other clubs have too. A lot of new season tickets and members. People have come on who want to support the club, and that's great loyalty. I think you've seen that across the UK as well. You've seen it in Europe. I think football fans have. They know how important their club is to them, and now is the time more than ever to buy a season ticket or a membership for a local club. So I'm confident we'll get back. I think it's going to be a hard year, and the sooner we can get people back. I've never enjoyed watching football on TV ever. I think being at the game, meeting your mates, going to the pub, just meeting other people and being around the game is what you want to do. So it's been a strange season, and the quicker we get past this, the better.
So obviously the season's meant to start in March. That'll run on till sort of, is it November time? Is that right?
End of November, yeah. So it'd normally run from kind of February to the end of October. So it's just kind of shifted back a month, and there was a lot of cases here, and in the last 6 weeks they were particularly high. So they were just pushed it out a little bit. Cases are coming down, and get back just after Paddy's Day. And
yeah. So when you look at it, obviously you're saying the season tickets are on sale. Do you think there'll be a point this season where you'll get fans back into the grounds? Do you think it'll be a gradual thing? And could you see a full house before the end of the season?
No, I can't see a full house before the end of the season. I think there might be some. I'd be getting a lot of guidance on that from the kneecap stuff, speaking to music promoters, because, music promoters are operating internationally and they have a good kind of picture on what they expect. I don't think we'll see full crowds. I'm hoping that in an outside environment that you might get the 1 or 2 meter distance, and, maybe around May, June. It'd be amazing for the European, like qualifying for Europe. For us last year, we hadn't qualified for Europe in 10 years, and for no fans to be able to go to the game, that was a killer for people. It was people who'd waited for a decade to get back into Europe. So I'm hoping that by the time we're in that Europa conference, that we could even have some kind of a crowd. And then it gets to that tricky thing. If you're only allowed a couple of hundred, we're going to have to do some kind of alphabetical system and, look after people on a rotating basis. It's tricky. No one ever expected to be here, and we're going to try and do what we can, have a fair system in place and get as many people in. But I think full crowds are going to be in 2022, personally. Yeah.
So, we've got some questions coming in from fans who are asking Damien Gallagher here. I've never been to a match in Dublin. Why should I go watch your team rather than the opposition? This is your chance to sell the Bows. You've got a couple of minutes. Go.
Well, there's one clear reason. There's 3 bars inside our stadium. We're the only club in Dublin with a bar in the stadium. Now, that is it. If you're coming to Dublin, Damien, and you want to have a pint and watch the game, there's one option. But look, at Bows, we're a members-owned club. We're 100% members-owned, and we've always been fan-owned. And I think that when you go to a fan-owned club, this sense of togetherness, and there's a great sense of that at Bows. We've been slowly improving over the last few years on the pitch and off the pitch. And, I think that sense of the people in the stand own the club, it can be really powerful in the sense that they feel connected to it properly, and the atmosphere, and being able to have the few points. And look, we've great young players. That's the thing on the football side of things. Keith Long and Trevor Crawley, like you mentioned, some of them, like say Warren O'Hara, who's just moved to MK Dons. He was with Brighton. He's another young player who's come through with a lot of really, really good, young, exciting players, and there's just excellent talent on the pitch, great atmosphere off it, points in the stadium, and a lot of the values that people mentioned earlier. I think, there's been good pyro displays and things which aren't allowed by the association, but do add to the atmosphere.
That's stuff that we'll move on from. You mentioned there's bars in the stadium. Now, I've been to Dublin a couple of times. I think the city is fantastic. But the one thing I do notice when I go to Dublin and I come home, my wallet is a lot lighter. So is it expensive for drink inside the stadium, or is this one that we can say, come here and get a nice cheap pint?
Yeah, no, it's cheap pints. That's the thing. Yeah, we run the bars ourselves, so it's not subcontracted out. So the pint of Guinness is €4. Like you'll pay €6 in the city centre. So it's still not cheap compared to Glasgow, but it's a lot cheaper than the pubs outside. So yeah, cheap pint in the stadium, and sometimes we fairly late ones as well. So you might find you're there later than you planned.
I remember being in Temple Bar about 2-3 years ago with my girlfriend, and it was her first time in Dublin. And I remember I gave her €20 and I said to her, go and get 2 drinks at the bar. And she says, I'll not need that, I'll get your change. And I was like, you're all right. So I went to the toilet, came back, and she handed me back 10 cents and went, well, what happened? But it's just, that's the thing when you go to Dublin, it's just part of the experience. And I've been several times and I think the city is absolutely fantastic. So just a question here from Barca Boy. Would you like to see the Shells go back up? We're talking about Shelburne Rovers here.
No, that's Shelburne. So Shelburne will be the other kind of North Dublin club. They'd be in Drumcondra again. They're very close to us, about a mile away. I think having Shells. Shells were they had financial problems similar to what we had at Bows about 10 years ago, and they've been in the first division for quite a while, and they came up and they've had some great signings, and for whatever reason it didn't work out, and they went down. Results went against them at the end of the season. There was a strange series of games, the last 3 series of games. But no, I think it's good. It's good to have strong Dublin clubs. It's a great away trip. As a fan, I enjoy going down there, and I think they will come back up, to be fair to them. And they're due with our new stadium that's due for redevelopment. It's a ground share situation, so the two of us will be in that stadium. So yeah, personally, as a fan of the league and someone going to games, I think they add a lot to the league.
And K McSweet44 coming in saying, go support Sligo Rovers. We'll put that one back away there. But looking ahead for this season, obviously you just mentioned you qualified for the Europa Conference League. One of the first teams to do so. Is a completely new competition. You're looking to build the squad for this season. What's the goals for Bohemians this season? What is the target that's been set?
Yeah, the target on and off the pitch is always to keep improving, and that's going to be hard, I suppose, on the pitch, because we finished in second place, and I think that we all would have taken second place before the season started, for sure. We finished ahead of Dundalk, and Dundalk have dominated Irish football for the last 5 or 6 years. They've done well in Europe. They did well in Europe this year. Getting to where they got in Europe is a huge achievement. In terms of Irish football, to be in a group stage, to play against Arsenal, they didn't get the results, but just to get there is the massive achievement. So I think for us to finish in second, I think it'd be great to get to a cup final. To win a cup would be amazing. We've got to the semi-final the last 2 years in a row in the cup. But it will be hard to improve on second place. There's no denying that the clubs that we're up against, they have greater financial resources. I've said that, and we know that, and the fan base know that. So it's and we do have a young team. So it's trying to improve upon the league position will be very difficult. I think we can hopefully get to a cup final, win a cup. And in Europe, we were really unlucky last year. We drew a team called Ferevar in Hungary. They used to be called, I think it's Videotron or Videon. They're quite a well-known club. Now, we went over there. They were 250 places ahead of us in the European rankings. They were the toughest draw we could have got. And their stadium, really impressive stadium. They big budgets, and I think they would have saw us as maybe somebody that they could have, and they maybe perhaps would be easily. But we played amazingly well over there. There was no crowd. I was able to go over just with the officials and the team, but we took them to extra time, and we took it to penalties, and on penalties we were ahead. And then we missed a couple of penalties. So to improve on that, I think Keith and Trevor, really good shape to our team, really well organised. As I said, a lot of talented young players. I think we can definitely go through a round or two in Europe if we get a good draw. And I think that'd be an aim too for this year. And off the pitch, it's just to keep growing the club and we're developing our women's side. We've more girls playing than ever, and developing those different areas of the club outside of what people see as the big games on TV, and the men's team grow all areas of the club.
And for those that are going to be obviously now looking and watching after Bohemian results, after watching this today, who's the kind of players that we should be looking out for this season? Who's the ones that you think will really make a name for themselves?
We brought in a guy, we think he's with Sheffield. He was on loan to Derry City last year, Stephen Mallon. Looks like an excellent young player. The guy coming in midfield, Ali Coote, who I think was with Dundee period of time.
Yep.
James Talbot, our goalkeeper. James is still very young. James was with Sunderland for 5 years. Came back, he was drafted into the Irish international squad. Excellent goalkeeper. And then we have a young guy plays in the kind of 10 position, Dawson Devoy. Dawson he's just turned 19. Got a lot of first team games last year. Really, really skillful player. Just always seems to have space. Gets the ball and he just makes space. He can be in a hole and suddenly he's out of it. Great shot and really young player, still developing. So all over the park, really, we've a lot of excellent young players, and we've made a big signing about 2 weeks ago. A guy called Bastian Heary, who would have played with Limerick. He was with PSG as a kid. He was with Linfield in Belfast last year, and we've just signed him. Now he's a more experienced player. I think Bastian's 28, but he brings a lot of presence and a lot of kind of big player into the middle of the park. So I think look, the games are all streamed. So that'll be announced in the next couple of weeks. It's not expensive. Somebody could pick up a stream for the league for a season for 80, 90 euros, watch all the games.
And that's something we're going to go on and discuss in a second, is the element of the TV deal. But just before we go on to that, I've got a question in from Highland Paddy, who says, will you miss going down to Cork City next season?
Definitely. Yeah, and look, again, personally, like Cork are going through a really tough time. Cork, we're a fan-owned club, and they're now in negotiations to sell the club. I'd love to see them stay as a fan-owned club. I think Cork, they had a massive fall in the last 2 seasons. Like Cork, where cup finals, winning cups, top 2 in the league, and have now just collapsed on the pitch for them, and to an extent off the pitch. And it's definitely not good to see for any league fan. Cork are one of the big clubs in Ireland. They get the biggest attendances, over the last few years. And to see them go down, really surprised by it. And the quicker they're back up, you need big, strong clubs. And Cork should be one of the top clubs in the country. Really, really surprised to see that happen to them. And I've no doubt they'll be back up. I just hope, personally, they don't lose their members-owned model, because I think that can deliver a lot. It has its challenges. But either way, whether they change owner and they go privately owned, I think getting them back up in the league with big crowds it's good for every other club.
And it's something that we'll look to when we're checking out the results over in Ireland this season to see if Cork will make it back up. But just touching on something that you spoke about a minute ago, and it's the next topic and probably the final topic we'll have today, and it's about the TV deals. Now, over here in the UK at the minute, the English Premier League is being streamed on Sky Sports, BT Sport, Amazon Prime, and now there's games on the BBC. But it was FA Cup weekend here in England, and at the weekend there, 9.2 million people watched Liverpool play Manchester United, which is an outstanding figure. It's twice the figure of the highest Premier League game, which is just over 4.5 or 5 million for Manchester City, which was also on the BBC. It does ask the question, is there a place for football on free-to-air television? And obviously, you guys have got the experience of that with the games being shown on RTE. You've also moved on to a streaming service. What have you found has been the kind of key to growing the game in Ireland through the television deal? Are you still looking for games to be shown on free-to-air television, or do you think streaming is the way forward?
It's a tricky one. Like I'd always say, live football. What's funny, I'd put live football above all else. And unfortunately, in Ireland, far more people follow Man United or Liverpool than follow Bohemians or Cork City or Sligo Rovers. That's the space we operate in, and that's just down to mass marketing. Like I remember chatting to a guy, and not to go off topic with it, but chatting to a fella who used to be a truck driver in England, and he told me that he's old enough now, he'd be nearing retirement, and he told me he used to know where he was in England. He'd park up the truck and have a sleep or whatever, and kids would be out playing football, which you don't see as much of anymore. But he'd know by the jerseys. He'd know whether he was in Wolverhampton or Middlesbrough or Doncaster or wherever. And now we said you drive by and you got 5 or 6 football shirts that a kid is wearing. You know, it's all the Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea's. So I think the game, personally, I think the game has been destroyed by mass marketing and big TV. And when you look in Ireland, I think terrestrial television, if you're gonna put a game on television, it should always be on terrestrial television. I think you need to look at, and there's this balance being struck in Ireland. You know, we've lower finances into the league, and we do need to improve the finances into the league and the clubs. But look at the Premier League. Where is all that extra money going? Does it benefit the fans in any way, or is it just benefiting players who are on wages that nobody can justify, and owners that bring in amounts of money that are just obscene? So I'd look at the game. Who is the game there to serve? The game's there to serve the fans. And it's there to serve the public, the wider audience, the people who identify with Liverpool or an Arsenal or a Celtic, and this is part of their identity as a person from that city. And I think that once you get into the massive amounts of money that you see with Sky, and you then turn it into this global thing, it's bad probably for those fans of those clubs themselves. Although it's probably hard to recognise that. It's bad for the game. It's bad for all the other clubs under it. The other clubs who never get coverage. So I think it's fantasy to think that suddenly you're going to have Premier League games shown on BBC. But I think there's a space for maybe a league or two below that to just get people back involved in local clubs. Because I think the emergence of big TV money for me has been absolutely detrimental to the game of football. It benefits so few people, and for everybody else makes it inaccessible, more expensive. And I just always ask that question: where is all that extra money going? Is it benefiting the man him and his father have followed the club for 100 years, or his grandfather or his great? It's not benefiting them, that's for sure. So, that'd be my take on it. It's a bit of maybe a socialist take on the whole thing, but that's...
No, I mean, it's a really interesting point, because when you look at it, obviously, the game has been shown on free-to-air television. You look at perhaps the English Premier League's contract with the BBC. They've got Match of the Day, a staple of Saturday night entertainment. And the odd game here and there now because of every game being shown on television, and it tends to be the games that aren't as attractive to Sky or BT. It might be a Fulham versus Sheffield United, but for you guys, RTE is the platform for the games to be shown. Now, obviously, you just mentioned the streaming service that is going to cover the whole league, and I think that's a fantastic idea. I think if you do have a streaming service, it has to be league-based, so that you can go in and I can watch Bohemians one week, I can watch Shamrock the next week, I can watch Dundalk the following week, and it's all part of the one package. I think that's a great idea. But do you think that the kind of cost of only being on terrestrial television as opposed to the money coming in stops the growth of the club? Would it not be great for additional money to come in from Sky that you could then reinvest in the youth system, that you could then reinvest in the stadium, that you could then reinvest in trying to push towards Europe? Would that make the league better if, for example, Sky Sports then started covering the League of Ireland? Or are you guys happy with the way it is with RTE at the minute?
No, I think there's a balance. I think, you see, because we're coming from such a different base, I suppose, like we're coming at a position where, across the league, to get an attendance of 3,000 or 4,000, like we'd get in some of the Dublin clubs, is a really great attendance. To be clubs who get attendances more towards 1,000. So we're at that space where all clubs need to grow quite a bit to get to a level. Like we are in European terms a pretty poor league. That's on our rankings. That's a fact. I love the league. I love all the clubs. I want to see it grow. So I think there's a balance to be struck between where you bring in money commercially and where you grow the game and make it accessible to people to engage with. And I think it's finding that balance, and that's a difficult thing to do. But there does need to be, and for us, we're at a different kind of proposition in Irish football in that, unfortunately, and the figures will show it, there isn't a great public appetite for people to tune in and watch League of Ireland games on TV. Most League of Ireland fans go to the stadiums because the football fan that has the tendency, pre-COVID, to watch football on TV is far more likely to get their Sky Sports package and follow a Liverpool or a Man United. And that's a huge challenge for us, because we're not gonna have the caliber of player that Liverpool or United have. That's never going to happen. So that's why you look at growing the clubs in terms of the different areas. But I do think it's a really tricky one, and it's getting it right and making sure that big TV money doesn't begin to run the game. And to me, that's kind of what's happened in the Premier League. They are the most important element of the Premier League now. They're far more important than the fans. Not in reality. In reality, the fans are everything. But financially, they've become more important. And I think once that balance tips, then decisions maybe get made by owners and the owners change a lot of clubs, and they're, there's a whole different discussion. But who are the owners? Should a football club be owned by, somebody from 10,000 miles away, or be listed on a stock exchange? Is that still a football club? I'd have questions around some of that. So I think it's a balance, and getting it right where you're bringing in some revenues to improve the league, but ultimately not making football something that you exclude people from, or that they have to pay a fee from, or they have to go to a pub to watch. I think when you do that, and that's maybe what's happened to the Premier League, I think you've lost some of what the game was about. And you can't refine that then. You can't just roll it back, because you lose whole groups of mostly working class people to the game.
So the questions come in here from Lawrence Connolly. Lawrence is one of the contributors here at A State of Mind. He said, should the Irish government pass a levy on Sky Sports, etc., for all the foreign matches they broadcast, and then pass that back to the Irish clubs? Now, as you said, there's probably more Manchester United or Liverpool fans or Arsenal fans or City fans in Ireland than what there is that will go and watch Bowes or Shamrock or Shelbourne or anyone like that. And they are broadcasting a foreign league. So I guess the idea here would be that for the fee that these companies pay to show their games in Ireland, that would then be passed on to help development in Irish football. I don't think that's a bad idea.
That's a brilliant idea. And what's interesting about that idea is I think that'd be against EU law, but seeing as you're not in the EU anymore, you can probably pass that law quite quickly. So no, that's brilliant. There is another one. Look, I've actually never heard anyone say that. So to Lawrence, that's a great idea. And the other one that's becoming obvious to people is that there's a levy in Ireland on all bets placed. So with your big betting companies, there's a levy of 2% that goes solely to horse racing. Horse racing is a big industry in Ireland. There's a lot of money in horse racing. But I've had some conversations with people lately who work in the betting industry, and from what I've been told, a large percentage of bets placed is on football. And football, 20 years ago, a lot of bets were on horse racing and dogs, but now it's more and more on football. So I think if that 2% became, that was split, and 1% of that even came to football, it'd make a huge difference. So I think we do need to look at elements like Lawrence has mentioned there, things that we bring in through the state that direct some money, because we do need facilities in Ireland, and we have a new stadium in progress. It's taken its time, but it is in progress, and there's been great work done by Dublin City Council, and we need support of the government here. But across the league, facilities can be improved, and they have been neglected. And the development of the underage setups that we spoke about earlier, they need development. And I think something like Lawrence has mentioned there would enable that to happen quite quickly. And all it's doing is taking money that is being spent on the game and directing some of it to the game here. And that's easy to understand for football fans, and it makes sense. So, yeah, I like that one.
I also think if you take the games away from RTE, you lose the fantastic punditry team that is there. Having seen some of the games through RTE before, the pundits over there, they're a different level to what we've got over here in Scotland. I'd take them over Chris Boyd any day, put it that way.
We're looking up some of them on YouTube for people who haven't seen them. Bill O'Hurley, he was the kind of the anchor. He passed away there recently, but and he used to have Graham Souness on a lot, and the arguments between Dunphy and Souness and Brady, it was like listening to three outfielders in the pub sitting beside you. They would absolutely go for each other, and highly entertaining.
So one for everyone to look up after this is broadcast. But I mean, Daniel, we've been on now for just over an hour, and the questions have been coming in, and it's been fantastic to have someone with the experience of yourself being behind the scenes at a football club, giving us an insight to what it's like, discussing more about what Bohemians are all about, and hopefully from this bringing some more attention to the club, which I think would be absolutely fantastic. Just before we go though, tell us about Kneecap. Tell us about the plans for the next 12 months. Where are these boys going?
Yeah, no, what? It's just, I feel, for the boys, just with COVID, I really feel for them, because what happened where I was when COVID hit, I was in America with them, and they played support to the Dropkick Murphys in the Alexandra Palace in London. I'd never been there. What a venue. The place was packed. And then we flew back to Dublin to play a gig with the Fontaines DC. Played a gig with them in the Olympic. They had a night to raise money for homelessness. There was great bands, great Irish bands that night. Just Mustard, Mary Wallopers, brilliant bands worth looking up, and headlined by the Fontaines. We played at that. And then we flew to New York, played a sold out gig in New York, three lads from the north rapping in Irish in a sold out gig in New York who were like amazing. And then we went up to Boston to play 3 big gigs with the Dropkick Murphys in Boston, and then everything collapsed with COVID. And we were supposed to play at Zidja in Hungary, a couple of big festivals in the UK, some big festivals in Ireland. And all that to be taken away was, just for all the work the boys put in. It's so hard to just to see all the bookings, and it happened slowly. People were like, "Oh, we're going to cancel that festival. Going to cancel that festival." With a big gig in the Olympia here in Dublin, nearly 2,000 people sold out, and to have all them cancelled. But no plans for this year, if they happen. We've moved all the UK dates to September, and the booker's confident with those. And that's going to be one of the first big things back. That'll coincide with a couple of big Irish gigs. The lads have an EP they've been working on. Probably going to release that in the next kind of 6-8 weeks. And we've got another couple of things that I can't say on the podcast, collaborations, and so there's a lot to come from them. And they're super. They're just great people. They're really, really intelligent, and what they're doing, taking the Irish language, coming from Belfast, with rap and hip hop. It's brilliant. The gigs are, and I'm not just saying this. Like I went to a Kneecap gig before I managed Kneecap as just a fan, and the energy is it's something else. It's it'll be very much like an Old Firm type energy. So
I'm going to leave you with one last question, and I'll see what your answer is to this. So you've got the choice for 2021: Kneecap #1 album, or Bohemians win the League of Ireland. You can only pick one.
You can't do that. Too many loyalties there. If I said it, if I went with, I'd be killed at Bows if I said Kneecap, but I love the lads. If both of them things can happen, I tell you, that would be the best year there's ever been for me.
Well, it's been fantastic having you on the show today, and hopefully we'll catch up with you later on in the season. We'll check in how Bohemians are doing. We'll see Kneecap's album going to #1 and Bohemians winning the league, because both of them are going to happen. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, just as it's been a pleasure to have everybody in the comment section watching on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. If you are watching along, share the podcast with your friends, spread the word. We're growing really well here, and we've got some fantastic guests lined up next week. We've got Dave Claxon from the Business of Sport, and in a couple of weeks' time we'll have some other big guests to come. But we're out of time. It's been fantastic having you on, Daniel. I look forward to catching up with you very soon. We'll keep in touch. Good luck for the season ahead, and for everyone that's watching, take care, stay safe, and we will see you all next week.